Gray is, well, she's a very dynamic ENTJ. She's really got a lot of facets to her. Probably one of the more well-rounded and wide-ranging eclectic typology channels that I've come across. I've seen her talk about MBTI, Big Five, Enneagram, lots of objective personality. I'm sure somewhere in her older videos there's astrology, or maybe she's going to get to astrology at some point. But I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know, you might. So what I really appreciate about her channel is that she's really good at explaining the systems, not just the systems in themselves, but like how they compare to each other, how they overlap, and how they might like supplement each other. So I had to have her on the channel so I could ask her a thing or two. And as she says, so she can yell at me. So Gray, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I can confirm there will be no astrology. I may mock the 16 Personalities website and call what they're doing astrology, but no explicit astrology. So there you have it.
Your channel's still young. Your channel's still young.
I can say no. I can say no in advance. That's not happening.
All right, you heard it here. Okay. So as an ENTJ, how insane is your self-esteem?
Okay, so that's always a weird question to answer because anyone watching me from the outside is going to go, oh, this person is clearly extremely confident. Look at how she's talking. She's not even prepared. I did not technically prepare for questions and I have answers ready to go. How on earth is she ready? Except that a lot of that confidence is coming from if I explain things to the best of my ability, if I'm able to articulate what I'm thinking, then I am a good person. So it's kind of this external front of self-confidence. But on the inside, when I come home after a long day of working at my computer, so I just go from the computer to the couch, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait, who am I again? So it's this very bizarre back and forth between very real confidence that I know what I'm talking about, I know how to explain things, and then a very kind of dark swing into the struggle of, wait, what did I want to do today? I forgot somewhere amongst all of the, external confidence. So that's kind of how I personally experience that.
Okay. I like that a lot. And I've noticed that. I think other female ENTJs I know have said similar themes about that. So I appreciate you saying that. Okay. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask, but I'm going to augment it for you. Okay. So I usually ask what types would you want on your team, and I'll give you like you and three other types. But my wife, who's an ISTJ, said, why don't you ask something different? So my question for you is, what types do you want to bring on vacation? So it's you and three other types, and then tell me why.
Okay, so if I was going to go on vacation with three other types, I would definitely bring an ENTP. So I'd be dragging my husband with me. Let's see, if I wanted to have another type with me, I would say probably, I'd actually want an INTJ with me, and then I'd want like an ESTP. So I'd want an ENTP because I would say other than myself, they're my favorite type. But then after that, it's just, I enjoy NTing with other people no matter where I am. And also there's a sense of having SE lower, even though it's not last, it can be a little bit hard to be going out into the external world and doing that level of new all the time. So what I've personally found for myself is that because the ENTPs also have SI, they do like to kind of retreat back to the nest a little bit sooner. So that's very helpful of when I get tired. So do they. So that's nice. We can kind of do lots of play hard, rest hard when I'm on vacation. I'd want an INTJ just because I'd want a fellow planner who can take some of the burden off planning for me. So I can it's hard like when my husband and I have gone on vacation, it's hard when I'm doing all of the planning and he's living his best ENTP life, but that's very tiring on my end. So I'd probably want another planner just to kind of take the stress off of that. And then I'd want an ESTP mostly because I think they're a really fun type, but I also think they really complement I think that their TI second really complements the other groups. And then also having that FE third, it's a little bit more FE from my personal experience than oftentimes a lot of the ENTPs are, because that NE brings them out of reality, whereas that FE kind of brings them a little bit more into reality and into the moment. So I think they'd be really good at keeping the mood up. And then also when the rest of us are tired or like, oh, we have to drive home, they're the ones driving home from that super fun day that we had, because the rest of us we're all done with the sensory. We don't want anymore.
So do you approach these type of things by which dominant type do I want around?
It's more like I'm looking at the general skills that the skills and also the negatives that tend to come with the type. I'm more worried about the negatives usually. So if I bring an INTJ, they're going to tap out way sooner than I am. I need other people who maybe want to go out again that evening after we take a nap. But the INTJ can stay home and stay in after we spent a whole day doing things. They don't want to go out again, but the ENTP and ESTP probably would. And so it's kind of, I'm looking for that balance of, I want someone who's going to be a little bit more on the introverted, thinking things through, but I also want people who want to kind of, play hard. And so I'm looking for that balance of good and bad.
Okay, so why did you not go with like an FE dominant type?
So in my personal experience, the thing about FE is like FE is absolutely amazing and I very much enjoy it, but it's also something that can butt heads a lot with FI last. Primarily, if I'm feeling a certain way, I don't really want to kind of have it be treated as, oh yeah, that's just a feeling that people have sometimes, but different things like, no, this is serious. And if I'm going on vacation, generally speaking, whenever in my opinion, when people travel, they're out of the norm. They're not sleeping like they normally are, maybe different time zones, maybe different elevation, depending where you are. That's a lot of stressors. And I really don't need my emotions to be treated casually in that state. So that's why I kind of skip FE as being on, at the top, but I do want some FE presence in my life because it does really help when you're struggling with FI last to have FE around.
Yeah, I would bring the ENTP as well, just because they have enough FE to make it fun, but not overwhelming. Because the FE can sometimes get real manipulative. So yeah, I would probably choose it in the same spot. Now this next question is going to sound kind of weird, but what do you think your actual function stack is? And I want to preface that by saying that with some other typology folks I've spoken with, the top 4 functions actually don't manifest for some people in the way that the Jungian model would suspect. So like, I think in my personal life, I'm more NITETISE. Others have said, no, the 4 functions work for me. Do you see anywhere where your function stack isn't exactly accurate? Like you might have something a little bit higher than the model tells you would.
Yeah. So this one I did think about quite a bit because I'd been doing some reading into, what Jung personally had said about the function orders. And I really like his concept of you have your dominant function, your primary function. And in my case, that would be TE. But then you kind of just have 2 secondary functions. And they're very much in balance. And I feel very much that way of where I am constantly in the state of I'm watching both at the same time. And I'm like kind of switching gears very seamlessly. And I definitely feel as though that reflects accurately. I would then say it's not so much like an order, but I think because I'm switching gears between those 2 states very naturally, that I'm also somewhat pulling up like a little bit more NE or a little bit more SI than like a kind of how people think of the ENTJ. Like no one's ever doing a function in isolation because we're watching behaviors and it's being expressed a bit differently. So I kind of see how when I'm enacting a vision for myself using physical reality, it's going to look like SI, even if it's a blend between NI and SE. So it's I kind of see it that way of they're both almost very equal secondary functions. And then I definitely see FI as being a major way, like being the way to define my identity. I've always felt that way. It's always been very much like how I feel and what I value is who I am.
I think because you and I are both content creators, I think that when you get into that mode of creation or it becomes a lifestyle, I think that NE just has to be there.
Yeah. For sure.
More than SE, at least for me. So that might be an advantage of kind of knowing how to maybe I don't know if you can really activate it. I guess you could activate it, but it seems to be more prominent in like NTJ's content creators. It's like they clearly have NE because after a while, you've experienced this. I mean, I think your oldest video is 9 months to a year old. Like at some point you have to come up with something new. You can't just talk about like how SI looks. Like everyone's going to do that video. So what's a new novel thing to do?
Right. Yeah, I definitely see that. I think that's also why I love I love NE in my life. Like I have a lot of ENTPs and ENFPs just in my life. I think because I know that I kind of know NI isn't enough for me. And I also know that SE only gets me so far. So I definitely see that as something I'm chasing continually, and that just like 5 or 6 of my friends, I have family members that I'm close to. I'm like, oh, they're NE too. Oh, and how did I not notice this before? Because it just starts like cropping up in this massive wave of the same exact behavior. It's like, oh, I'm in love with NE. Okay.
That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. I think I find my relationships with ENTPs and these, and specifically working colleagues, is to be like the most beneficial to my type, my NTJ. So interesting you say that. And obviously you married one, so you're stuck with that for a while.
I have to work with him full time too from home. So our desks are right next to each other. We work full time just at the 2 desks. So I have to love NE. If it wasn't my favorite function, this would not work. So.
No, short marriage. Let me ask you this. Activating your NI, I'd like to know, what do you think the next breakthrough that type is going to have, or the typology community is going to have? Like, what are we going to see coming up?
So I actually have a kind of depressing answer to this one. I don't think the typology community is going to be the ones having the breakthrough. I think that the work being done in neuroscience, I think a good example would be, to a degree, Daniel Amen, although I don't agree with everything that he's up to, but especially like Andrew Huberman. The work that he is doing is very much trying to understand the various states that a person is in, and then how to activate or deactivate those depending on the situation. And that pretty much just sounds like trying to move through various functions to me. And I think that what neuroscience is going to end up doing is discovering the functions, but they're going to define them their own way. They're going to define it their way because they're going to be the ones discovering it through the neurochemical processes that we all have to live through every single day. And so I kind of view it as typology, as it is a branch of psychology, which psychology, psi means soul. It's a philosophical discussion. It's not about really, like science, as a hard science. I think neuroscience will end up kind of eating away the scientific aspects that we're all looking to see in typology. And then typology will move, as it naturally will, back towards psychology and pure, which is much more philosophical, much more abstract, and not really expecting to be proven. It's just expecting to be and tell you how to live your life, or and why it's worth living.
Okay, I don't know if that's necessarily depressing too much, or I'm guessing I want more clarification. So they're going to basically prove that there are chemical reactions in the brain, and they're going to like retroactively assign those, or they won't even use Jungian theory. They'll just say, right, this is what it's called. And then they'll say, no, TE isn't that. TE is actually this neurochemical hitting that neurochemical and doing that thing.
Yeah, I don't even think it's necessarily like they'll call like specific like neurotransmitters a function. Like you would never call dopamine SE. Like that's not how it works. Everybody has dopamine, right? But what I think what will end up happening is that they will create their own definitions for, hey, we've noticed that this set, like for example, there's been some work done in China where they're taking brain scans of people while trying to do complex tasks, and they're finding that a certain amount of activation, I want to say, in the the limbic system is actually related to low conscientiousness. And it turns out that low conscientiousness tends to generally relate to an extroverted perceiving function, so SE or NE, right? And so because all of these things are related, they're going to define things their own way using their own definitions, and that's what's going to be scientific. So many people want to say, no, we can prove type is real. And it's like, we will prove type is real, but not by starting with Jung. They're going to prove type is real from this side and meet us over here.
Oh,
and I think that us Jungian typologists, yes, what we love is the fact that it tells us what to do and why we're here. And we love the philosophical aspects a little bit too much to ever let go of them, to go into pure science. And I think that's the fundamental issue. And that's the sad part, is that many people who love it love both, and they want to see them go together, but I don't think they will go together.
Okay. I like that. No, I'm way on board with all that. Um, yeah, I think that's great. I don't think it'll do anything for like it won't people will still flock to type in all social media
For sure.
channels and
Absolutely.
I don't think there's going to be any damage there. I feel like the pure science part is extremely limiting because then you can't talk about interesting parts like collective unconscious or synchronicity because obviously you're not going to be able to prove that, but it's fun to talk about the experiences of it and be like, this is clearly a thing. If we can't quantify it, are we going to be okay with that? And I feel like there's a large branch of people that aren't. We're not okay if we can't explain it. If it's not measured, it's not real.
Yeah. And I get that. I understand that. But then I also look at even the work that, for example, Darren Brown has done, where he's able to use an incredible amount of carefully planned subliminal messaging in order to move people to behave a certain way. And it's clear that perhaps it's like if you studied what he's doing to the brain, it's not necessarily a collective unconscious, but it sure looks like one when you can get a whole group of people to do the exact same thing because they were all exposed to repeated small, tiny bits of messaging that they didn't even know they were picking up. So that's we can look at what Darren Brown does and we can explain it scientifically, but for some reason, the words collective unconscious and what Darren Brown is doing, why aren't they going together? And that's what I mean is that the two worlds, because they have this. And now those of us who like both worlds will go back and forth, but the two worlds in isolation tend to not like the language used and the perspective taken by their opposite. So they just kind of are repelled. And that's what I see. I don't mind jumping back and forth. I'll listen to a neurochemistry podcast and there are other neuroscientific podcasts, and then I'll hop in and I'll listen to someone talk about Jungian theory for 3 hours. I don't mind the back and forth, but a lot of people wish they were more united. And I believe they won't be.
Okay. I think I'm fine with that. You know, believe what you want. It's fine. I like it. I think you have a very good grasp on where things are going. And what's the timeline? You think like in the next 2 years, it's going to move that fast? We'll see that?
No, I don't think it's going to move that fast. I think that like in many ways, we know more about the moon and Mars than we do about the human brain because the thing about the human brain is it doesn't want to be found. It's kind of hard, you know. How do you watch the watcher? Who watches the watcher?
Who guards the guards? Yeah,
exactly.
There it is.
It's a very difficult thing to observe your own processes and correctly differentiate out without taking into account someone's subjective perspective, which is limited.
Right. Okay. So in the same vein, I have a very kind of a similar question. Just from your perspective in like on YouTube and seeing what's going on, what subject do you feel needs more attention in the typology community?
Yeah, I pretty much just touched on it, but I think that, so I've been doing a lot of looking into Donald Hoffman's work and then also just the work in general around the concept that we do not actually see ourselves. And by what I mean by that is specifically, if you want a glass of water, you don't think, I want to get a cup and then I want to go to the sink and then I want to turn this like you don't think all those things. You think I want water and your arm moves. You don't realize how many little things that your brain is shortcutting for you. But also the reason that you think I want water isn't because you thought that at all. Your system is saying, I require this chemical in order to survive, and I'm detecting that we're low. So there's a huge amount of our machinery that we're not interfacing with. You know, our computers are not our desktop interface, and our human mind is also not actually what we think it is, because how we interact with it is like a desktop interface. So you see your icons and you can click on them. That's not your code.
Right.
Many people think that their little icon, oh no, that's who I am. It's like, no, you're a lot more complicated than that. And as a result, many people believe the subjective story they tell if they say, no, really, I am Mozilla Firefox. I am Google Chrome. It's like, no, you are a series of codes and programs that you don't even know are running in the background to keep you going every single day. And it's something where I know that I'm doing it all the time. I'm lucky if I can catch 1 out of 10 where I can go, hey, wait a second. Why am I doing that? Where did I get that idea that I have to be doing that I should be doing that? Where did this come from? I'm lucky if I get 1 in 10. It's something where everyone's doing that all the time. And we're lucky to get 1 in 10. And most people don't even know that it's happening at all. And you can kind of, and here's the thing, here's the roughest part. You can see it in everybody else.
Right.
And so you can sit, and this is where like you'll go to a family gathering, and then afterwards when you're driving home, you're sitting there with your spouse and you're talking about everything that happened. You're like, oh, they were so weird and they did this and they have no idea what's going on. And every single other person at that party is doing the same thing, talking about everybody else, because they can see everybody else's problems and see all their code, but they can't see their own. So all of this has been talked about at length by Donald Hoffman and his work studying how the mind actually works and how consciousness actually works, which is that consciousness comes from the need to survive. It is not from our perceptions. So we don't perceive reality. Our consciousness tells us what we need to perceive in order to survive.
Oh,
and that's
subtle. That's subtle.
Yeah. It's an important distinction though. And that distinction is why we don't see anything. I don't need to know all of the steps it takes to get me water. Now I can recite them if I think about it, but I don't need to think about it. How many different things do you do every day? Anybody that you aren't even aware of all the steps it takes to do that? And then think about how many important decisions you're making every single day, and you don't even know how much is going on in the background processes.
Yeah, I mean, and you've chosen a very simple task. Think about like an athlete running, trying to not avoid being tackled and scanning the environment. Like you could ask them retroactively, like, tell me all the steps you were thinking as you were running with the ball. So there's like, you couldn't even try to list them in order.
What makes it so real is that most athletes can talk about being in the zone where they're just in a flow state and their programs are running and their front brain's not there. That's the level of intense, like that's how powerful these programs are, is you can sort of be not even present when you're in them.
Right.
I've had that playing music where if I'm playing a song that I have muscle memory, I will forget where I'm at and realize that I've just been playing and not even notice. Driving a car. How many times have you driven a car and you're like, oh, I'm here already. Where were you? You might have hit somebody on the way home. You don't know. You weren't there. We're doing that every single day. It's happening right now. I'm communicating an extremely high level and I'm focused on communicating to you. I'm not paying attention. I have no idea how my hair looks. I have no idea what's going on.
What are you doing with your hands right now?
Who knows? I don't know. And that's the point. We don't see what we're doing on a constant every single day basis. So don't even think about what, like on a football, think about your decision if you fall in love with somebody. How many different programs are occurring on the back end that are driving you to fall in love with somebody? The most meaningful thing that you can have on earth, a beautiful relationship with somebody, your best friend, your loved ones, your career, what you want to do with your life, who you want to be as a human being, your ideals, everything is on so many different decisions you're not even tracking every single day. That's what's crazy to me.
Okay. Well, you've got me. Now I have to ask you another question, because
go for it.
When you talk about codes running and programs and interface, there is a guy that I follow, J.A. Sandoval. He does cognitive typology and he does voltology. Everyone gets all like worked up about it. I've seen like, do you know, I'm sure you know what that is.
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
So he talks about in the same way that you can, if you were to have a cat and a dog and you just erased the cat and dog, but you had motion trackers on them, you could just look at the motion trackers and say, that's a cat, that's a dog by the way they operate. The cat runs on a certain code, the dog runs on a certain code, ENTJs or TENI runs a certain way, SEFI runs a certain way. So we can, as you are very expressive with your hands, you look a certain direction, you do things like this, or you roll you can say that person has a code running, thus they are probably SEFI because SEFI has a certain pattern they do over and over and over and over and over. Are you someone that would believe in that as a way to be like, I think I can work backwards from their, I think he calls it like their affect to cognition, like going backwards? So
now if I were to do something like that, I would take Jung out of it entirely. I would I would not be trying, because from what I'm aware of with voltology, and I correct my understanding, what I'm aware of is that there is an attempt to try and connect the physical movements and the way of speaking and the facial expression. Like there's a certain amount of trying to tie that to the functions.
It is.
My issue is how do you know which movements or which functions besides assigning them. I define TE this way. I'm seeing it cluster. It's like, okay, but that's a cluster. You haven't technically proven anything. And also we haven't even proven that TE is a real phenomenon. You're tying it to the real phenomena of movement. So now we have this problem of like, we're moving.
This is hurting your brain. I can tell it's really.
It gets too close to wanting to be like scientific of let's observe the physical human with a very philosophical thing. It's like, that's why I kind of like, let's separate those a little bit. That's important in order to keep our terms well defined. If I wanted to go about typing in a general category way of trying to observe movement, I absolutely think you can do that. If you look at the way that so for example, obviously I have two parents, and they, I have a mom and dad, but the way that my mom communicates verbally is a lot closer to how I communicate. But when you watch me walk around, I don't move like my mom does, I move like my dad. And so I think there's a certain amount of, okay, I have some things more in common with one and more in common with the other. How much can we try to parse out these commonalities and give them definitions with air quotes and say, okay, this is this movement pattern. This is this speech pattern. This is this eye movement pattern. I know that Casual Cognition Calypso does some work with eye movement patterns as well. You can try and track all those different patterns and see if you can start to see clustering of individuals, and then try to tie those clustering of individuals by asking them, okay, tell me about the things that stress you out. Tell me about the things that are hard for you. Tell me about the things that are good for you. What are things you like? You can try to then see if you can form correlations out of those physical clusters. But I would take all discussion of type out of it. I would take Jungian theory completely out of it if you were going to go there, just because I would want to do it right and make sure it's very crisply its own system. And the reason I wouldn't do that, it was going to take too damn long, and I don't need a PhD in physically typing people by their arm movements. Like, I don't need that. So
I think it's an endeavor worth like somebody, and people are doing it. So I think there is.
That's them.
Yeah, that's fine. So I know that you would have a strong opinion on it. So that's why I asked you. Great. This was like really fun. You're super smart. I love all your explanations of like just any topic you have is always it's very good. It's cut really well. So it almost looks like stream of consciousness. So you're just like 5 minutes of this subject. That's great. Anything else you want to say before we go?
I mean, thank you for having me. This was really fun. I'm glad you're enjoying my content. And if you're looking to find me, my name is Augmented Personality on YouTube. I'm the girl yelling at you at the camera. So you'll know you're on the right channel when you out for your headphones. So
perfect. Awesome, Gray. Well, everyone follow her channel, subscribe. I think she just eclipsed 1,000. I think it's 1,000, 1,100. So, let's keep it going. Appreciate you.
10,000 by next year. All right.
You go.
Take care.
Perfect. Okay. Bye.
I tried to live without you. Just can't get you off my mind.